Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping straight into Chapter 2 of a major 2025 study all about smartphones, and we're going to focus in on what the research is calling a really critical window of vulnerability. That's the preteen years, from ages 9 to 12.
So let's get right to it. A landmark study from 2025 published in JAMA, it's revealed some pretty startling numbers about cognitive decline in this exact age group. And, this isn't just about kids getting distracted. We're talking about measurable, physical changes in how their brains are actually developing.
Okay, first up, reading comprehension. The study found that preteens with even moderate social media use show a 15% decline in their reading scores. That's compared to their peers who aren't on it much. That's a huge drop in their ability to just understand and process what they're reading.
Then there's vocabulary. Get this. Over just a 2-year period, heavy social media users saw their vocabulary growth shrink by a staggering 23%. It really suggests that all that time spent scrolling is pushing out things like, reading books or having complex conversations, the very things that build a rich vocabulary.
And finally, working memory. That's that essential skill for holding information in your head to solve problems, to learn new things. For preteens spending 3 or more hours a day on social media, their working memory drops by 18%. This really impacts learning across every single subject in school.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You might be thinking, okay, that's for the kids who are glued to their phones 24/7. But the research shows the damage actually starts way earlier than most of us would probably think.
That same JAMA study, it found that just 1 hour a day, an amount a lot of parents might feel is totally reasonable, is linked to statistically significant drops in these key academic skills. It really makes you question if there's any safe amount of social media for kids this age. And look at the long-term impact. This isn't just about a small dip in test scores. Over time, this stuff really adds up. High-use preteens can end up falling 1 to 2 full years behind where they should be in reading. That creates this massive achievement gap that is just incredibly hard to close later on.
So here's the bottom line. Timing is everything. The preteen brain is in the middle of this period of rapid-fire development, which makes it uniquely vulnerable. The hit is just more severe for a 10-year-old getting on these platforms than it is for a 15-year-old. This is not just another phase of growing up. It's a neurologically sensitive period.
But the cognitive stuff, that's really only one side of the coin. The mental health risks that have been documented for preteens with early smartphone access are honestly even more alarming. Research from a 2025 Sapien Lab study draws this really clear line connecting early smartphone adoption, we're talking getting a phone before age 13, to these 3 severe mental health challenges, and they tend to pop up a few years later, right when they hit adolescence.
And we're not talking about minor issues here. For girls especially, the rates of self-harm are 2 to 3 times higher if they got a phone as a preteen. The damage to their sense of self, which gets formed by constantly comparing their real lives to perfectly curated online ones, is so difficult to repair later. And all of this is cranked up to 11 by 2 big things: losing sleep from being on their phones late at night, and cyberbullying that, unlike the old days, follows them home. It's inescapable.
Okay, this is absolutely critical to understand. This is not a one-size-fits-all problem. Not even close. During this preteen window, the risks and realities of having a smartphone hit boys and girls in profoundly different ways.
For preteen girls, the big risks are emotional and social. They are just much more susceptible to anxiety from social comparison, that constant need for online validation through likes, and that online meanness, like being excluded or having rumors spread about them. For preteen boys, the dangers are more about addiction and attention. They're 3 to 4 times more likely to develop compulsive gaming habits, and that leads to serious attention problems, checking out from school, and basically replacing real friends with online gaming friends. And this is exactly why that generic advice like, oh, just limit screen time, often just doesn't work. This clinical perspective from the study makes it clear that any helpful guidance has to be tailored. It has to address the specific ways each gender is being targeted and harmed, whether it's the image-based apps that are hurting girls or the addictive game designs that are hooking boys.
So the big takeaway here should really be the urgency of it all. The years between 9 and 12, they aren't just another phase of growing up. All this research is framing this period as a unique window of neurological vulnerability, where the negative impacts can go deeper and maybe even be more permanent.
What this means is that the whole conversation has to move beyond just counting hours of screen time. Real, effective intervention means we have to understand the content kids are consuming, the platforms they're on, and the very specific ways boys and girls are being harmed. It demands a much smarter approach, one that looks at each kid's individual personality and risks.
And let's end with one final, pretty provocative thought. The research seems to suggest that the cognitive and emotional damage that's done during this preteen window is much harder to undo than it is for kids who start using these things later as teenagers. It leaves us with a really critical question about the future. What are the long-term consequences for an entire generation that's living through this critical window right now?